Well, firstly, thanks for coming, everyone. We know other talks are available. She's trying to laugh. Yeah. Thanks for everyone apart from you. This is a joke. It's 6 o'clock.
We won't keep you from your drinks. Too English, we won't.
I'm Paul Thompson from Leeds Beckett University, and this is Phil Harden, who mixed a lot of records that you've heard in the 80s and the 90s. And we'll come to that,
We'll come to that, yeah, we will.
At some point.
Okay. So, we're talking about the service model, which we've already introduced twice in 2 other presentations and 2 papers that are going to be published. So, the service model of contemporary commercial pop music has been explored last summer. We talked about PWL Studios, Pete Waterman as team leader. I was there as chief engineer throughout the 80s for most of that. You can read further about that in my book, PWL from the Factory Floor, available on Amazon. Sorry, Paul. Get your one in, yeah. And in Stockholm last year, we presented another example of the service model based around my partnership with Ian Kerno in the 1990s. And we were working with Tom Watkins, the entrepreneur. He was the team leader. I was very specific about that. I know probably not many people were there. And we mainly worked with manufactured pop boy bands, E17, Boyzone, that sort of thing. And so here for our 3rd paper, we're bringing the model up to date. I thought, rather than just leave it sitting in 2 fantastic pop eras, let's bring it up to the now. With Paul's aid, of course. So what we're going to do today is, that was my current PJS music production pop team that was pictured on the first page, and I'm going to refer to that in as much as we've done, or I've done, a practice-based inquiry at Western University in Oslo in 2015, and we're going to show you what happened when I introduced the service model to a mixture of students. So this is us bringing it into the education arena, and the results of that.
Because we're talking specifically about the creative process of pop music production, if some of you, I'm sure, are aware of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's sociological work on creativity, and in essence, creativity, creative practices, creative thoughts, creative ideas, creative actions appear at the intersect of 3 main components within this system. The first one is the domain, which is the symbol system. It's the cultural matrix. The field is the social organisation that understands and uses this cultural matrix. And then there's an agent, which can be an individual, it can be a team of people, it can be an institution, and they're able to use the domain, rearrange it in a novel way, and they present it to the field, and the field decides whether it's creative or not, and whether it's able to be added to the current symbol system of knowledge. In commercial pop production, the domain is essentially made up of 4, I was going to say, we're missing one. It's made up of 4 main parts. In reality and actuality, these 4 parts aren't separated, they're all mixed up in a really complex fashion, but just for the purposes of analysis, we've separated them here. And broadly, musically, it includes the Western popular song, so that includes its structure, its form, lyrics, lyrical settings, themes, instrumentation, and how all of these things are arranged. There's technical components to this as well, so that includes recording technologies. There's cultural, how these recording technologies are also used. There's a social aspect to this as well, which shows actually how the creative system is really all mixed up, and how, for the purposes of analysis, they are separated as domain and field. But that includes terminology. It also includes ways of working and ways of speaking within the recording studio whilst production is taking place. And the final one is a commercial element to it as well. These are about remuneration systems, publishing deals, royalties, and producer deals as well. The field of pop music production includes all of those who can affect the structure of the domain. So for our purposes, that includes artists, engineers, songwriters, programmers, record producers, and all the other people listed there. Because it does also include audiences. Audiences also decide who is authentic and who should be added to that pop music domain.
Great, thank you, Paul. So that gives us the theory background. Many of you might know about that from the extensive work from Phil McIntyre and from Paul. This is a chance to plug your book, Paul.
It's coming at the end.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the personnel of pop music production. And this is very specifically aimed at the pop world, the kind of people I've worked with in the past, but as I say, bringing it up to date now. So the service model and its makeup of personnel really requires, if it's going to include songwriting, at least 4 people. So the lyricist and top line are generally the same person. So what I'm saying is a team leader who may or may not be musical, may or may not be technical, programmers, musicians, and then the top liners. So that's a random picture of myself in Lamont Dozier.
You're just showing off now, aren't you?
Just showing off 2011. So I took the service model into Westerdahl, and that's a picture of me working with the students there. So this was across 48 hours. I was given 16 students in total. Great thanks to Jan Torre. We had 8 music production students, 8 popular music students. So we split them into the appropriate groups of 4. I got in each group. I got someone to volunteer to be the team leader, the main producer, someone that was capable of musically programming in their choice, either Logic or Pro Tools, mostly in Pro Tools, someone that would be responsible for the lyrics and the top line, and then the 4th person was probably generally a guitarist or someone add in like that. So the students' domain acquisition, do you want to run through that bit?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the students were studying musical programs, and some of that involved domain acquisition in musical aspects, some of it technical aspects, and again, they'd all acquired a mixture of those things at various different points. The really important thing is that by Phil's introduction as executive team leader, he was able to bring in and renew and update their domain acquisition with very specific examples, because the brief was very specific.
Yeah. So I took a live brief into this on a project that my PJS team is currently working on. So I knew the client, I knew the type of music, I knew the structure that we wanted. So it was very direct, and I'm going to give you the examples here. But BPM was 128. The key of the track needed to suit the artist Tina Charles, who's a sort of retro disco artist, and basically these references I'm going to play you are the same as we gave to the students, the same as my team used as well. So the first example is an example of song arrangement and production arrangement.
Tonight, I found you in the darkest hour. I found you in the pouring rain. I found you when I was on my knees, and your light brought me back again. Found you in a river of pure emotion. I found you, I hold you true. I found you, and the music playing. I was yours.
So that's a 24-bar chorus preceded by a 4-bar bridge, and coming out of that 4-bar bridge is a 1-bar break. So that's everything. I told each group this is what we want, that specific arrangement within that part of the song. And there's still plenty of things that we could point out. Justin Bieber, his big hits, and One Direction, recent hits. This is a current pop style where generally you don't just get an 8-bar chorus these days in this type of format. You get at least 12 or 16 bars and possibly more. You certainly get at least 2 versions of the hook hitting you. So the next example was the type of style of song, as opposed to arrangement. An 8-bar chorus, as we used to do in the 80s. So then our third example to the students was, okay, here's me having already presented these references to my pop production team and writing a song for Tina using this arrangement and approximately, vaguely, that type of chord structure as per the PWL 80s sound.
And I need you tonight. Yeah, I need you to hold me tight. And I need you tonight.
We're in our chorus.
I need your arms around me now. And I need you all through the night.
All night. Singing the chorus.
I need you to hold me tight. And I need you in my arms, in my heart, in my world. I need you more than ever before. I need you.
And we're still drumming in the hook.
I need you.
Winding good.
I need you.
Who do you need?
So, very, very specific in terms of how close we wanted it to the wanted. So, as Paul says, with the students, I was kind of executive team leader, so I was popping in and out of the sessions. I fed them this whole, the references and the service model, which Paul has already described really a lot of the theory that we've got in the top box there. But the real key element that is different to other things that have been presented in production and in the pop arena is a very specific team leader. So now I've taken on that team leader role. We had Pete Waterman that I worked under in the 80s, I had Tom Watkins that I worked with in the 90s, very much leading the team, saying this is what the client wants, this is the style, this is where we need to go, these are our references, these are our bullseyes, and if the production team delivers it, generally that team leader follows up with the commercial results. What I'm trying to say now really is that this is not a system as we might sort of look back in the 80s and 90s and say that was a good percentage of hits. What I'm saying here is the service model is a system to basically get to this point, whoever the client is, to please all of the requests from the client so that your team is delivering a product that is accepted by the client, happy client, pay the bills, but beyond that, certainly with my production team at the moment, we're kind of working in retro production and remix, so we're not aiming for mainstream. So the other thing I wanted to say about this before we run for Paul, this is really important to me, and you're going to come in. So in my mind, when I started, this was part of my PhD journey, and one of the theories that's come out of it, is I saw pop music, pop production and pop songs as linear. Pop creativity is linear. In discussion with other colleagues, I've come to realise that it's not a linear process, and even when we go through this process in the system model, which I've kind of just described, has happened with that track and the next ones we're going to hear, the Csikszentmihalyi systems model of creativity, where you are tending to go round, as Paul was saying, the agents, the field, the domain, and it tends to be non-linear. Everyone seems to agree that creativity is non-linear, and it's because in here, in the creation of the song, and then we get to the vocal session and we get to the final production around the vocals, everything is very skewered and very circular until we get to that end point. Anything else you wanted to say on there, Paul?
No, but I did want to move on to that creative process
Yeah.
and exactly what was happening within each of those stages. So essentially what Phil was asking the students to do was to use their domain knowledge, to rearrange it in a novel way, and particularly within the confines and constraints of that live brief. In particular, how many bars the chorus lasted for, how many times you heard the hook, all of those things. The interaction between the systems model and its elements actually look a little bit more like this when we scale them down. In effect, the domain now becomes a micro domain because it corresponds to the types of the symbol system and the structures and cultural matrix specific to that task. The people involved actually form a microfield in assessing, evaluating, and maybe rejecting some of those ideas. And the creative group, the agents, who rearrange the domain in a novel way, they present it to the executive team leader, who may say yes or no on a particular aspect. So what we wanted to do was to play you some of the end results.
Yeah. So all of these tracks, on day 2, we realised that there weren't enough volunteers within the team to sing the tracks. So these are 4 songs by the students written on day 1 from all the instruction that I've given them and the facilities there at Westside House. So we made a quick decision that Sunday morning we had to hire a session singer to come in and sing the tracks to make it more efficient. Each group got 2 hours with the session singer, myself overseeing that session, but them producing it and doing all of the operation. And just to point out again that this overnight, I said to them, well, we at least need to have an intro, an 8-bar verse, 4-bar bridge with a gap as I was talking about, and the 16 to 20-bar chorus. And that needs to be written both melodically and lyrically. By the end of day 1, we had most of the melody, but we didn't have all the lyrics. So the top liners went home and worked overnight to come in, knowing that there's a session singer being paid Sunday to come in and sing on 4 songs. So so we're pretty. Paul's idea, it's wonderful, great. We're going to ask you to select your favourite track. And they're all only 30 seconds, so all you're going to hear is the bridge and the chorus basically, and it's songs 1 to 4. Thanks, Paul.
So we jump and we dance and we're in the party trance. Stand up, for the feeling. Stand up for the love. Stand up for the feeling.
Song 2.
I can't wait any longer. I feel it stronger and stronger because you make me whole again. I hope this never ends. Your kiss makes me complete. Let's make this last forever. You make me whole again. Let's make this last forever.
The variation just seems like coming in anyway.
Song 3.
Hope you're taking note of these, because you guys are going to pick this.
Any day now, time is running out.
4-bar bridge.
I can't wait for you to come around. Distance makes you found me, and I still can't hear your sound. And I can't wait, no I won't wait. Oh, I can't stand it, hands on the ground. Still you leave me hanging. I can't wait for you to come around.
modern pop hits, a hit chorus and throws them down. That's only driving. So, what do we want? One vote each from each person?
Yes.
Yeah?
Just a show of hands, who would have picked track 1? Okay.
2.
Track number 2?
What was the question?
Well, which one would you choose?
Which is your favourite of the 4?
Yeah.
You may not like any of them.
It's a very simple question, Steve. Which one's your favourite?
I've got a question now.
Which one's your favourite?
Number 2?
Simon Cowell. Number 2.
Number 2, what do you want for number 2? 1. Number 3?
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Number 4? Great.
I like number 4 as well.
So I had the opportunity to send the 4 tracks, obviously in their full amount, at least up to the end of chorus 2, to the record company of Tina Charles, Carl Cox at Prolific Music. This was his general comment: all songs remarkably good compositions, etc., etc. And he chose one. I didn't ask him to choose one. He chose one to record not with Tina but with a different artist on the same label, which was, what a fantastic result for the students. We didn't expect a commercial outcome, but we got one. Why did he choose track number 3 for 4 songs? By far my favourite, same with you guys. Brilliant, literally leaks from the speakers the moment you play it. Instant as Bistro. Yeah. We don't need to play again, actually. I think we can move on to the next play.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what we actually see in that process, and that you've all been engaged in, is the filtering process of the field. We've actually shown the creative process in action just in this room. You guys have all acted as the field. You all knew what was expected within that cultural matrix, the symbol system. Phil had told you what was expected within that live brief. And the students rearranged that domain in a novel way, and we, the field, decided which one to choose. But those at the record company decided that this one fitted the brief most closely.
And it was recorded by the other artists.
Yeah. Oh, it's been released?
And published. Hasn't been released, but it was recorded and published.
Okay.
Released.
Yeah. So this is where I think there's a number of things to draw from this study. But an underlying one is probably about popular music education, where we're able to introduce a live brief that can create a more, it can provide a better opportunity for students to gain valuable feedback from the field. So students are able to dynamically interact with the field, they're able to learn those mechanisms and criteria for selection that operate within them. And exposure to the field can also help students to develop field-related skills. I mean, they've done an amazing job doing this in 2 days.
Yeah, and at the end of the 2 days, we did have the course leader for the performance course come in and give evaluation at the end of those 2 days before I sent it off to the record company as well. So, fantastic set of Norwegian students that gave up their weekend for this. This wasn't part of their curriculum. It was a sort of, come in and do this for a weekend as volunteers. And I think that it can be, as Paul is suggesting there, this type of thing, beyond just a simple live brief, this is very, very specific, can be incorporated into modules and programs.
So our conclusions then. Firstly, one of our reasons for studying pop music is that it is considered quite ephemeral, quite throwaway, and that we wanted to shine a light on the fact that it's extremely creative, particularly because it involves the interaction of the systems elements. Phil wanted to illustrate how the service model is being updated and can be used in contemporary pop music production. And it also shows how introducing the service model into popular music education can actually give students an opportunity to be socialised into the field of pop music production, where they're able to learn about the mechanisms and criteria for selection that operate within them.
And that's about it. I got slightly confused with the team members. My ideal scenario is team leader, like myself, DJs music. I have a music programmer, specifically does all of the music. It's a fantastic, great acquisition. I have a rhythm programmer, different to the music programmer. So 2 different programmers doing 2 specific jobs. And then if there's songwriting involved, we bring in a lyricist, top liner. So I'm proposing that a team of 4 like that, and the team leader can be a young person. It could be, if we were looking at a group of music courses, you bring in someone from the business course maybe to be the team leader to coordinate a live brief project, and you would choose the others from performance courses and technology or production courses. So we're proposing that it can, whether anyone takes it up in higher education, I don't know, but it was certainly very stimulating for those students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I wants to go and have a drink. Only a few minutes late. Listen.
Your experience with the students, did any of them have problems with the rigidity of what you could read?
No, not at all. They happily took it on board. I think, for me, one of the most interesting things that came out of it, I went into it expecting that all 4 tracks would sound the same. You'd think if you're in the same key, same tempo, same song arrangement, all writing for the same artists. But there seems to me, other than the specifics I've asked for, creatively, song-wise, chord-wise, very few similarities. And what that said to me is that within group creativity projects like this, once you've got human interaction going on, it's going to make things different. So there was one group that, like you say, possibly slightly resisted it, wanted to be more guitar orientated, but they still produced one of those 4 tracks. So yeah, very good. I think if one tries to facilitate it with students, they need to be thoroughly set up and ready for it, and it needs to be part of the curriculum. We're not sure that many British students would give up their weekend to come in and do a project like that, but sorry, it's one of
yeah, thanks for your presentation, I really enjoyed it. This is more of a comment than a question, but one of the things that I really like about it is not only is it sort of, you're teaching songwriting and you're teaching that creative process, but it could also be used as a tool to teach history, in the sense that this kind of approach to music composition is similar to the Tin Pan Alley model, to Motown, to other sorts of factory. And often I think the students have difficulty kind of understanding that because it seems so remote. But if you start that history with a task like this, then I think that would help make sense.
Would be interesting, and it was interesting at the keynote this morning. I liked his phrase, camouflage plagiarism. It's kind of what we're doing here, but that's how the pop world works.
It's a really, really interesting point, I think, and I think that's probably our fault for not introducing it well enough. But educators, those models of songwriting, because we chuck students in all together and say crack on, and we don't assume that they will assign themselves roles. So,
yeah, because it's a good way to teach like distribution of labour and creative processes, and even something like the famous Adorno article on popular music that talks about standardisation. The students can't quite come to terms with it, but if they did this, they'd be like, oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant.
Last one.
I was just going to ask you just to kind of just state what you think the key thing the students are getting from partaking in this.
Apart from the facilitating from someone from industry like myself that's got the experience in the area, and I'm not saying the person facilitating it has got to be that, but one of the biggest things for me personally is simply the word service. The word service, in my view, is not used enough in education and with students, and especially when they first start, they think they're coming into a music course, whether it be business, performance technology or whatever, but I'm the type of person doing this type of music for most of my career, and I consider I'm in a service industry. And I say to students when I do guest lectures, you could well be in the catering department. In this area of music specifically, and really in most areas, you are servicing a client one way or the other. So if you can get this into your mind early on, that actually you're entering a service industry. I'm not saying it's not creative, I'm not saying it's not fun, I'm not saying it's not musical, but the word service is and the idea of a team leader, you know, they're the two kind of newest things within it that I think are relevant. And the team leader, you know, we can look back through history, you know, not just Tim Pan Alley, but other teams, you know, where you, I mean, Pete Waterman modelled PWL in the 80s on Motown, and to him, he was the Berry Gordy. And we might hear criticisms that he's co-producer and he's co-writer on the credits, but he didn't spend much time in the studio, but boy did he drive the team as a fantastic leader. So they're the kind of things, you know, just to break it down quite simply. Yeah.
Let's go back, Trent. Oh.
You're separating the rhythm programmer from the musical programmer?
In my own team, yeah.
And what would you say the advantages of that are? And is it based on your own experience?
My own experience of, you know, all music programmers will tell you, you know, who are great musicians, will tell you and demonstrate to you that they can program drums. But that's only because they end up, because they're the programmer. In my experience, if you get someone who is more of a rhythm specialist, and the guy on my team is like a hip-hop rhythm person, and he comes in and programs pop stuff for us. But it takes, what it does specifically for the music program, who might get a little frustrated about not doing the drums sometimes, but it takes a pressure off of them. You know, all you've got to do is keyboards and bass upwards. Don't worry about, and I find I get better results like that.
So you think that collaborative, so that collaborative creativity helps the songwriting?
Yeah, and generally they're working in separate rooms. They're not necessarily sitting next to each other, not at all. You know, I mean, the sort of thing like the third track I play as a reference. You know, all three of us work on Logic, and the master is always a Dropbox. So all of us access it, and as we add something, it just syncs up with the other person, and on you go. Sorry, Nissan?
I was going to say, your paper on Friday will answer that also.
On Wednesday?
Oh, Wednesday.
Yes.
Are you in on Friday, Nissan?
I am, yeah, sorry, the Wednesday paper.
Yes, Nissan and I have done a paper that isn't, you know, the service model. It's a whole looking at production, and myself and another producer from a cognitive scientific aspect of why we do what we do.
Other papers are available. You're just on the cell all the time, aren't
Well, you know.
But also just sort of why you buy it.
Yes. Yeah.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.